Welcome, everyone, to the Shaded Pixels podcast, where we break down video games to their shadings and pixels, topic by topic. I am one of your hosts, Esteban Cuevas, here, joined by the illustrious BJ Brown.
What's up?
Look at that swag. And also here with me is the voluptuous Shawn Heartbreak Kid Richards.
What's up, everybody?
Well, we got a quite busy topic today because we're going to be talking about the Telltale Games layoffs and eventual closure. And we were even talking about it before we started the podcast, ladies and gentlemen, because even I'm not entirely sure of all the details that went into this, because it's a mess. It's just it's a freaking mess, people.
Yeah, man.
So
If it's a landfill at this point,
yeah, it's
just
a freaking landfill.
The more confusing it is.
It's a garbage fire. It's just a complete and total catastrophe. And we're going to be getting into the specifics, including the stuff that I don't understand, and maybe my fellow hosts here don't understand. But just for the simple breakdown of what's going on, Shawn, why don't you tell the audience what is happening? The very basics of it, anyway.
So for the three of you that are not living under a rock and don't know anything about the Telltale situation, basically here's the gist. Telltale was coming out. They are hot off of Batman the Enemy Within, rather, and working on The Walking Dead season 2. They worked on up till episode 2. They had a couple of things in the pipeline, and then they declared bankruptcy. They are done. They are out. They laid off 90% of their staff, and now they're working on basically a skeleton crew to finish up what they've started. And it wasn't a nice layoff, if there is such a thing, where, their workers got severance and everything. Their workers went home with nothing. They are left without pay. They had 1 week of their health insurance until that's gone. So they were out on the street, cold and without coats, to the point where they are now in the middle. Telltale is now in the middle of a class action lawsuit because turns out you can't do that in the state of California. So right now, Telltale's in a whole big of a mess. People who have bought the season pass for The Walking Dead, the final season, are now left with basically 60% of their game not going to be completed. So people are wanting their money back, understandably so, to where now Telltale is looking for someone else to help fund them so that they can actually get the rest of their game out, as well as helping get their employees paid. So right now there is a huge mess that is going on with them. So why did they fail? What happened? And how can this serve as a cautionary tale for some of the other developers or aspiring developers out there?
Yeah.
Did I do a good job? That was a good job.
That was pretty good. Okay. That was pretty good. It's that question at the end that I'm like, oh god.
Yeah. So for those who don't know, podcasting is not my primary job.
Shocking.
I am actually a full-time engineer, and I won't say that I know a whole lot about the whole venture capitalist structure, how it works, the ins and outs, details, all that other kind of stuff. But I know a little bit about the reasoning why it's a thing.
Quick note, this is the reason why Telltale's in this mess. This is what we were talking about before the podcast. It involves venture capital.
Yeah. So like most studios, when they're small, like Telltale was in the beginning, they've got whatever money they can scrounge around of their own. They may have a couple of friends, family, or Kickstarters or whatever. They'll get their money together and do what they got to do. Telltale was hoping to make it big, right? So, I forget around the timing of it, but I think it was just after. I want to say it was just after they did the first season of The Walking Dead, when they hit their blockbuster success with awards out the yin yang, all that other kind of stuff, and people saw it at that time, even though it wasn't necessarily for them, a revolution in the way storytelling is done in video games.
And it rejuvenated the adventure genre as well.
Right, which is the real truth. It really rejuvenated, because in fact, the co-founders were basically old LucasArts, developers that basically formed this company, and they took some of their own licenses with them, hoping they could, redo them and not re-release, but, continue their work on those that they loved so much. So, in a similar form or fashion that Facebook did when they first started out, they went out and they took their model, they took all their awards, their proof of concept, and they looked for investors, venture capitalists. And the whole
Okay. I'm gonna stop you right there. My research showed. See, this is why this is a mess, people. My research shows that they started looking for venture capital around the time they started making the Jurassic Park and Back to the Future games. So it's in between.
Okay, but they didn't secure it until after Walking Dead, though. I don't think.
I don't know about that.
Most of the money.
My research shows that it was after Sam & Max and the CSI games this used to make, and it was before those games. So I think what happened was they got the money, they released those games, and they didn't really do that well. But then Walking Dead hit it big,
right?
And then after that they started getting multiple venture capital.
Right. That's when they started getting big bucks, because people were seeing, and the investors that were looking for high rewards recognize that Telltale was on to something at that point, even though they had already released, other titles before that didn't quite do so well. Because as we all know, when you start licensing stuff, the bigger the license or the bigger the name, the more pricey it gets.
Right.
So I want to say, the big thing that you're trying to do when you're getting investors to give you money before you're even making money is you're bringing them a model, you're bringing them something, and you're saying, this is our plan. We think it's going to work. It's going to make a lot of money. Just help us out. Give us this amount of money. This is what we need to do it. And this is why, so they hired a whole bunch of new, people for the studio. They got whatever tech that they needed in order to get things going up and running, make their studio bigger, right? Mm-hmm. But, and this probably goes into our thought pattern as to why it didn't work. A lot of what it seemed that they were doing was pulling more licensing deals, right? So what did they have? What did they start throwing out there after Walking Dead? I remember Game of Thrones, Batman,
The Wolf Among Us.
Well, I thought that was before Walking Dead.
No,
was it?
The Wolf Among Us was the one that came directly after The Walking Dead.
Okay. Yeah. Was that a license? Was that like a book?
That was a comic book license.
It's a comic book license based on fables. They basically try to recreate.
Oh yeah, that's right.
They tried to recreate the success that they had with Walking Dead, because Walking Dead was
just
a comic.
Also. Mm-hmm.
And they're like, well, we'll get another comic. So they got the comic Fables, and that's what The Wolf Among Us is on.
And I think after that they got Well, they had planned to get Marvel also, right?
Well, they did
They
technically.
did get a Marvel game.
Yeah, that's right, because they got Guardians of the Galaxy. That's right.
Guardian of the
Right.
Galaxy. What else?
I think
You
they
said
had
Game of
even
Thrones.
another one.
Tales from the Borderlands. So they
Can't
got a
forget about that
game
one.
license.
Mhm. Yeah. So, you're hearing all these names
Mhm.
and it's trendy, it's like, oh yeah, they're getting this, they're getting Marvel. Oh wow, yeah, I wonder what this is gonna be like. So that was their plan, that was their buzz. And they were hoping that the buzz around around all this licensing was going to be their inroads to the new golden age of, the Sam and Max or Zach McCracken or whatever style adventure games or
Day
whatever.
of the Tentacle.
Day of the Tentacle, that kind of thing.
Full Throttle, Grim Fandango. Yeah. But basically like heavily story influenced point and click adventure games, even though
right, choose your own adventure games basically.
Even though Telltale's games aren't necessarily point and click.
Right. They're a little bit more. But you can pretty much see the same formula through all of them.
Right.
Problem number one. And then the other issue in it, and I think a lot of our viewers out there will have probably seen this if they followed this issue at all. The fact that they had so many titles that they were releasing back to back to back, episode to episode, they were pushing the people that they had really, really hard. So you're seeing a lot of those people complaining about the work conditions and everything, and the issues and problems. So the turnover was high. So anytime you got stuff like that, if you've got talent where there's high turnover, then that's not a good thing, for, of course, trying to meet your deadlines and all that other kind of stuff. So not only were they not quite getting their best work out with their best people, they were also putting too much on their own plate. Mm-hmm. And to top it off, the little bit of buzz that they had after their flagship titles, Walking Dead and Wolf Among Us, Batman, which was supposed to be really, really big for them, mm-hmm. didn't really, the numbers that they were seeing from Batman just weren't, I guess, in the direction that they were really looking for.
Right.
And even though, like we saw last year, they had layoffs last year, that wasn't necessarily something that kind of threw, like a red flag up to people, because lots of studios do that.
Well,
they'll finish a project. They'll finish a project. They'll hire a bunch of people, finish a project, lay off, a good, not necessarily a good number of people, but lay off some people because they're like, oh, we just needed them to get to our deadline.
Yeah.
And then, go about their business. But, this is
that layoff though that they did last year was actually very notable though, because it's the same reason why they ended up going under this time, because it was for the exact same reason. I want to pull back a little bit because, again, this is a freaking mess. Something
We're
to
digging
explain
into a well
is
that we don't know how deep it goes.
Yeah, pretty much.
One thing we need to explain, because I don't think we explained it to anyone who may be listening, but venture capital specifically is different from, say, what you probably hear a lot with the video game industry with shareholders. It's the same idea, but it's not exactly the same, because you don't buy shares. The company is not public per se.
Yeah, it's not for ownership or whatever.
Yeah, and you don't have shareholders that you're trying to appease. What you have is basically a private investor, essentially, putting in money into your company, knowing that they're probably not going to get a return on it at first, and they're just continually going to be pumping you money just because they believe in your idea and they believe that it'll be incredibly profitable somewhere down the line.
Right, which is kind of where I was leading to with my example as being an engineer with the fuel cell company that I'm with.
Okay, my bad.
Because for years, our company, even before 2003 or whatever, I think it was a research company. So once they decided, before they decided to go public, they had a bunch of investors, that basically were just dumping money into the company so that they could get to the point that they needed, I think, in order for them to go public. And I think now, even now, we are public, but we still, of course, it's different than venture capitalism, but the thought pattern is very similar.
Mm-hmm.
Investors are very interested in the technology. They can see it. They're like, we know it's on the cusp. We're behind you. We have a belief in your product. We have a belief in you and what you have and what you can bring to the table, and we believe that it can skyrocket. But we know that probably we're not going to get immediate return from it, but we're going to keep giving you money as long as you prove to us that you have a plan that's going to get you to that point of profitability. That's always the thing.
And that's the thing that confused me, because everyone and people who know about this story with Telltale, a lot of people were like, "Oh, well, their games weren't making money. That's why they're going out of business." Not entirely.
Yeah, that's not
the thing, because they were running off of venture capital, meaning that they were getting money from people expecting not to get their money back right away. So, right there with what BJ said, as long as you have some sort of plan to show that you're going towards a place of profitability. So, what I got confused about is, what the fuck did the Telltale CEO screw up at, where they failed somehow to prove that?
Well, the way I think about all of this is, as I was saying before the podcast, I think whenever you have, a lot of shareholders there, you have a large base, and basically they can contribute and pitch in and all this. Whenever you have investors in this venture capitalist fund, at least the way I look at everything, I'm no business person. I'm still trying to gain my footing in all of this. It's almost like if someone doesn't like something, they'll pull out. And that's a big chunk of where Telltale got their funding. And when you have a lot, and I do mean a lot of investors, you're basically having a Jenga tower. Yeah, some of those investors are heavier than others, and yeah, some of them will pull out. But whenever you have enough investors pull out of a company, eventually one of those investors is going to be big enough and strong enough to where whenever they pull out, the entire thing's going to fall. And that's exactly what happened. Telltale had they struck gold once, but when that gold ran dry and they were still going through the same formula, trying to use those exciting properties like Batman, like Marvel, trying to bank off of those big names to sell their product, when they were basically running their employees into the ground, crunching them almost to the point where it wasn't worth it. When you have something like that and the return on investment is minimal, it's not surprising to see something like this coming. It's not a win, it's an if, or it's not an if, it's a win. And honestly, I'm surprised they lasted this long to make another season of Batman. Given the amount of properties that they've had with the engine that they were running, people who talk about it know that their engine is notorious for being terrible. It's buggy, it's glitchy, and while it can run on different pieces of hardware, it's the same one that they've had for years. They've not tried to update it for...
It's got to be like
at least 10 years.
Something like
at
that.
least 10 years.
Yeah. Which is way too long.
Yeah. Even though it's smaller, newer pieces of hardware are still going to have an issue with it. And when you've got something that ancient, it's bound to fail. And yeah, they did try to catch this. Telltale's CEO, I believe, came out with a statement 2 months before. I think it was just a couple months before this all went down, saying, yeah, we know we've got to fix all this. We're going to get to it, and we're going to get all this taken care of. But I think that was just, it wasn't enough to save them from the inevitable.
And kind of personally, I think to kind of get to what Esteban was trying to really piece together, I think what Shawn highlighted seems to be the key. It seems as if Telltale's higher ups made a bet, or not even a bet, made a gamble. They put the attempt to become profitable and hit gold again with another property above innovation, going for another game engine so that they can do more with the type of storytelling and the way they do their storytelling, right? It seemed as if they were like, we've got our formula. All we need to do is crank out more and crank out volume, and we'll eventually hit the sales numbers that we need to take the next step. They took that bet or took that gamble, and it didn't work.
They were looking more towards the short term. If you look at how they were budgeting and how they were managing their costs, so to speak, rather than the long term, rather than investing in a new engine, in a new base where they can build newer and better games, they basically put their money into, okay, what property can I get next so I can get some more money? Who can I get so that I can get a more popular game out there, because we need this money and we need it now. Instead of, okay, we've got The Walking Dead, we've got that. Let's kind of build something that's a bit more solid, maybe get another season out, and people will see it, see that improvement, and then we'll be interested to see where we go on from here, instead of this scramble. Because that's honestly, whenever you look at the big picture, that's what I see. I see a scramble to try to get some money, and that's honestly not it's a sprint. It's not a marathon.
That never works.
Yeah.
Well, I think there's even more to it than that, because I know when I was trying to look through a lot of what's going on, I kind of ran across a Wired.com article that was really talking about the Telltale closure. But they were talking about it in a light where Telltale is not the only one that is going through this. I mean, I think they said...
I think I read that same article.
Yeah, you probably did. I mean, they talked about it. There's been at least 10 other major studios other than Telltale that have closed just this year, in the past year or so. And a part of that is, and from what they were saying, a part of that is a culture of just the video game industry in general. You know, in terms of they've got a deadline. In order for them to hit that deadline, they hire a bunch. They overwork those people. They have them work 20 plus hours, a day. And you got to get all the way to that crunch and get it done. And then once they finally hit it, just like we were saying earlier about Telltale, hey, studios do this all the time, crunch, 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 crunch. Okay, we don't need you anymore. Bye. And push the excess out the door so that they can just maintain with their core group, people. And that's something that's, it's not just Telltale that does that kind of thing and has that kind of, I guess you would say, toxic atmosphere. Yeah. I guess you would say some studios are just able to do it better than others, or in a way that, just maybe because they're making profit. Maybe, I don't know. Unfortunately I don't work in the video game industry. I can't speak for all of them, but it seems, according to that article, that this is a norm, unfortunately.
Yeah. The working conditions at Telltale have already been reported to being extremely terrible. Actually, for a very long time. I remember watching a video made by ex IGN editor Alana Pierce, and she went on to comment to say that the working conditions at Telltale were actually a well-known industry secret. That even before The Walking Dead season 1, everybody knew that working there was actually terrible, and that they worked them to death, that their hours were terrible, and their benefits were small, and it's just the way that it was. That it just wasn't a good place to work, and I don't know, like, to the extent of how it is for other companies. Another company we know for sure is Electronic Arts. Not that we know the conditions there, but they definitely do the practice of, we need to get this game out there. Let's hire a whole bunch of people. Let's get it done, and then once the game is done, get rid of them. You're completely expendable. And then they even do that with their studios. You were talking about all the studios before that had gotten closed this year and past few years alone. A good chunk of them are Electronic Arts studios, because they just, when you don't put out a game that makes them multi-million dollars and only makes you like 2 or 3 billion, then they put you on a throwaway title, maybe give you one more chance, and then you're out the door.
Yep.
That's what happened with Visceral Games after Dead Space 3 didn't sell. They put them on Battlefield Hardline, which no one really cared about. Then they had them do, I think, DLC for some other game, and then they shut them down.
Yep.
And that's been the case for, let's see, I think Maxis has shut down that way because SimCity didn't work for them, and then they had them just make DLC for the game, and then I think they just shut them down.
Yeah,
and a whole bunch of other smaller studios. Well,
it's a pattern for them, and people are saying that it's starting to go that way with the Mass Effect developers.
Yeah, there's rumors because Mass Effect and Andromeda not doing well, that Anthem is essentially their last chance, and then after that, they're either going to be moved to supporting other titles or just being flat out shut down.
Yeah.
And then they could possibly just be shut down after they're finished doing whatever support work they end up having to do after Anthem, if it does not succeed.
Right. And I think in that situation, though, it's more economic than mismanagement or anything.
Right.
Like that.
Well,
I won't say that
argument,
because of the last Mass Effect kind of seemed like mismanagement to me from the way the stories have been.
I think that's the argument, though, especially with that article is saying that they just use them.
I think with BioWare there, though, it was kind of twofold because they lost their innovators, the real heads, the real brainchild behind how well Mass Effect's game did left before they really got down and dirty about this whole Andromeda thing. And then with Andromeda, they kind of, the people that were there, they had great ideas, but they had no logical pathway to getting to it. And then once they realized that they couldn't get to where they were saying they wanted to get to, they basically were like, okay, we've got to get this done. And they just kind of sectioned stuff off to get it done. Yeah. So
that's one thing. Actually, I was talking to Shawn about this a little before the podcast. The people who really made Telltale successful, the first season of Walking Dead, they're doing fine because they left the company soon after that. And a good chunk of them went to form Campo Santo, which is the company that did Firewatch. So they were able to get out of it just fine. It's just unfortunate for the people who, stayed with Telltale.
Stuck with it. Yeah, because the people that were left there to head it just...
Yeah.
And this was traditionally early 2015. I was looking back at it, and in January 2015, that's when their CEO left to found. I can't remember the developer's name. I can't keep. And then Lionsgate actually was the one that said, "Okay, we're going to step in. We're going to get all this done." And then that's when you notice a lot of the other stuff that they wanted to get into, and then that's when that started to kind of fall apart.
Uh, going a little bit back to what BJ was talking about. Eventually, this ended up with in 2017 they had layoffs, and it was for the exact same reason they had layoffs then for the exact same reason that the company ended up going under now, and it was one other venture capital investors pulled out. So that was actually the very beginning. Now, it was, I'm assuming, because I couldn't get straight answers on this, I'm assuming it was a investor that didn't put a whole lot of money into the company. So in other words, they could afford to take that hit. But it resulted in them laying off, I believe, 25 people. And then after that time, they decided to restructure, and they got a new CEO. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it's the guy who used to work for Zynga.
Maybe.
It might have been him. I feel like I should really know this because this is the guy who ended up screwing up everything. This is the guy who's the CEO in the year or so that the investment went, bad. Because that's what ended up happening right now. One of their big investors pulled out, and then they went, okay, there's literally no more money anymore. And this is the guy
Was
who
it
knew they were going to pull
Smilegate?
out. This is the guy who knew that they were going to pull out and did nothing about it.
Or are you talking about the CEO, Pete Howley?
Pete Howley. Okay. Yes, Pete Howley. What did you do before this?
And it's interesting to note while you're looking that up
Mm-hmm.
that just like how Camposanto left to make Firewatch, there was another studio that also opened from former Telltale developers, Night School Studio, that made the recently released Oxenfree.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oxenfree, yeah,
Former
that's
Zynga
what it was.
executive. Yep, he used to be the executive, an executive for Zynga. Which, if you're not familiar, Zynga is one of those companies that made a whole bunch of Facebook games.
Yeah, mobile and Facebook games, right?
Mm-hmm.
They are the Farmville people.
Ah, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
That makes sense now.
Yeah, he also worked with Red Robot, which was a game developer. I feel like I should know that name.
We probably should. They had a big game. That was a big, not necessarily a big studio, but that was a big. There was some big game. What was that?
Right? Like
What
this is
was
they
that?
did something.
Oh, I gotta look it up now.
Oh god, this is where the research started falling apart.
Yeah. And also, by my own research, I'm sorry, I can't do more right now, but
Yeah.
the only reason they are keeping on the Skeleton Crew is not for The Walking Dead, but for Minecraft Story Mode, which is undergoing its second season. They're finishing that, and then they're done.
I think we're thinking of a different robot company.
Yeah, I'm
Because
thinking
I'm
of
looking
Bad
it up,
Robot.
and they made a game called Life is Magic, and I've never heard of it.
Yeah, I was thinking of Bad Robot that does movies.
That's what it is. That's what it is.
Come on. That's the crossover between Life is Strange and My Little Pony that we always wanted.
There you go.
Yeah, so he's the one who did this. Well, he didn't do it, but he didn't do anything to stop it. Essentially,
Yes.
Under his command, because when an investor decides to pull out, you can't just pull out one day and just be like, okay, I'm gone, bye. There has to be notice. There has to be a switching of funds. There has to be paperwork done, and none of that is going to get done without the CEO knowing, and the CEO could then tell his workers, well, this is going to happen. So over the course of X amount of time, we're going to have to lay people off. We're going to have to make these adjustments. We're going to have to restructure whatever it is he decides that they need to do to make up for the loss of money. And he just didn't do that.
You know those like clicker management games where like you see the happiness meters on people, and then you see that happiness meter go down or go up depending on what you do. Yeah, he was the type of person that watched the happiness meter go down, but instead of trying to click on them to try to get their happiness up, they just let them go, and ultimately he lost.
Yeah. So I think that catches us up to what has actually happened to Telltale. Like, we've covered all the backstory, everything that got him to this point, and we've gotten a little bit into the conditions of what was happening and all that stuff. Now we're probably going to have to be talking about what's going on afterwards, what's going on with them trying to still make Walking Dead final season, trying to get more money, and more importantly, the class action lawsuit. So I think we'll do that after a little break. So we're going to take just a little bit of time. This is still such a freaking mess, but we're going to get through it, ladies and gentlemen. We'll be right back.
See you on the flip.
And we're back, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for staying with us. We're talking about Telltale Games shutdown and how much of a mess it is. We've kind of covered all of the stuff that happened before the closure and how we got here. Actually, I think BJ found something that we can add on to that part. So let's do that. It's a mess, ladies and gentlemen. We're still figuring this out as we go along. Let's put this in there, and then we'll continue on with what's going on after its closure. So,
Yep.
BJ, take it away.
So, I was kind of interested just to see. Honestly, I was searching to see if there were any proceedings that were going to be taken on Telltale as a company or the heads of Telltale in a criminal fashion. Because, I don't know if we mentioned this, the way that they laid people off was, I think, illegal. They didn't give them enough notice. Well, I don't even think they laid them off, right? They just fired them or whatever you want to call it. They laid off, fired, same difference. They didn't give the proper notice or whatever to those people. And I think it was illegal in the way that they did it. So, I was doing a Google search to see if anything has progressed in that manner or if there was any news surrounding that. And I kind of stumbled across an article that maybe some of you remember that GameStop did, where they interviewed. GameSpot. Sorry. Back in 2016, where they interviewed their communications head. What's his name? His name was Job Stauffer. He was the head of creative communications at Gamescom. And so, basically through the whole interview, they were basically talking about how Telltale was dedicated to keeping their gameplay format, which is exactly what Shawn was saying. They basically were saying that they have their framework, their game engine, and all that they need to do is just crank out the story. They wanted writers so that they can make decisions on the kind of Batman you want to be. And that was literally one of the answers that they had in the interview. Rather than trying to figure out new ways for you to punch and kick with Batman or hit stuff with Batman, you got to decide whether you're going to be Batman or the Dark Knight. That kind of decision making, something that has to do with multiple story arcs, that kind of thing. And at one point in the article, the interviewer actually goes into the whole question about, well, your framework is notorious for having problems and glitches. And he kind of got flustered a bit, and I'll kind of have to quote it because it is kind of interesting the way it went about. He kind of said, for anyone that is experiencing issues for any game, not just a Telltale game, if you're allowing minor technical quirks to get in the way of your enjoyment of the entertainment, and then in parentheses he put, at this point Job pauses, searching for the right words. The silence lingers, reaching the point of becoming awkward. I wait patiently. And then Job answers, hang in there. And he says, you almost said something bad there. And of course they laugh and let the developers ensure they can smooth things out as quickly as possible. And then the rest of the interview kind of continues on regularly. You know what I mean? So it's just kind of interesting. That kind of parallels what we were basically assuming. The game engine is crap, and yet they still just decided, look, we've got what we need. We've got the framework. We know how to use it. We're just going to crank out quantity instead of quality, so that we can do what we do best, which is storytelling.
Yeah. And it looks like they were emphasizing the quality in the wrong places. From what you were saying, instead of hiring maybe a few people to flesh out their engine, they focused on hiring writers so that they can flesh out the type of story and options that you were going to have. And while it's admirable what they were trying to do, ultimately it failed for them.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
As Esteban dabs for us.
I was coughing, but yeah. So that brings us to what has happened now. The CEO decides to let everyone go except for a skeleton crew of 25 people. 250 people lose their jobs. They are told on, I believe, Friday morning or Thursday morning. I can't remember which. But either or, that they got about 5 to 10 minutes to clear out their desk and are escorted out of the building. And that's the only chance that they can get their stuff, aside from the possibility of coming back to get anything they may have missed the following Monday. And just like that, their jobs are gone. There is no extra pay. There is no severance. There is no health care after a week. And there is no warning of this whatsoever. And there's even been rumors saying that there's even points when some people started coming into the building and showing other people to buy it and telling them, oh yeah, this is going to be empty in about a few months.
Yep.
And sometimes the employees would be like, what?
What?
And
upper management never told them anything.
Yep. And just so the people know, this is a violation of a U.S. labor law, the Worker Adjustment and Retaining Notification Act of 1988, also called the WARN Act.
Mm-hmm.
And it's requiring most employers with 100 or more employees, like Telltale, to provide 60 calendar day in advance of mass layoffs of employees. So basically, the law says you have 2 months, 60 days to say, okay, shit's about to go down. You guys got about 2 months. Start looking for jobs and get yourself stable and secure. Mm-hmm. Telltale didn't have that. Or if they did, their CEO kind of swept it under the rug, saying, yeah, guys, don't worry about, never mind the people behind the curtain trying to buy us up. It was basically just, work like normal. And then next thing you know, they walk in and the doors are locked. That's essentially what has happened. The doors are locked. There's stuff sitting outside in cardboard boxes.
Yeah.
Not even that.
What I was about to say is, like, all this stuff, as you may piece together, is illegal as fuck. So
yeah.
Now the WARN Act, correct me because I don't remember. Is this a nationwide law or is this California only?
It is a nationwide law.
Right. Okay. So that's the nationwide law. But in addition to that, there has now been filed by several former employees of Telltale a class action lawsuit against them because the company was in California, I believe San Francisco specifically, and
yes,
and there are even further worker laws in California that are even stricter than the WARN Act, and as you can imagine, this violates so many laws.
Right, that's what I was looking for. I was hoping I could find something to say.
And it's actually in San Rafael, California.
Okay.
Yeah, it's so fresh that I'm certain the proceedings haven't gotten very far yet.
Yeah, that's the one thing about that. We do know that the class action lawsuit has been filed by several employees. It's not looking good for Telltale at all because there's no way that this is admissible in any way, especially in California, which has some of the strictest laws on businesses in the country. And the thing is, though, is that there's not a whole lot to say about it because, as BJ said, this has just been filed, so there's probably not a lot that has happened. It's probably been filed, people know that it's happening, and that's about it. No proceedings has probably happened yet. And as such, with these kind of things, they'll probably be kept secret, so we probably won't hear anything about that for probably years.
Yeah.
This also is going to affect a couple of other things, though, that's going to be happening with the company. Telltale has announced that they still plan to work with investors again because it worked so well the first time, and other people who want to help the company in order to not pay their employees, but to finish The Walking Dead final season. And this is while they're still also working with a skeleton crew to finish off the Minecraft thing that they're working with Netflix on.
It's not. They're not working with Netflix on that, because Minecraft is owned by Microsoft. So they're working with Microsoft for Minecraft Story Mode that they're looking to complete. What they were doing was working with Netflix on a Stranger Things video game.
That's what it was.
okay.
Yeah, Stranger Things.
But because of all that going through, that fell
got
through.
canceled.
So now Netflix is looking at still getting the a game version of that series adapted, but it's basically
gonna be
back to
Telltale.
square one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the game was canceled by Telltale, but the project is still in limbo because now Netflix is shipping it around to other developers. So,
Exactly.
I mean, if you're a fan of Stranger Things, it still might happen, but it's probably not going to be in the way that you thought because
Right.
Telltale isn't working
And
on it
here's the thing about the whole, Telltale wants to finish The Walking Dead, but not pay their employees. One thing that you have to keep in mind that these games are released episodically, which means that, a lot of people will pay for just episode 1, episode 2, the pieces of it. But a lot of people will say, okay, I will give you $40 or $50 or $60 for this, and I'll get the entire finished product. Well, now you've got people who have paid, let's say, $60 for The Walking Dead and only got half of the game.
Yeah.
So I think that's why they are starting to use that as a priority, because if you have people saying, you promised me this amount, but I was only getting this, where's my money? You have a lot of angry people here. So, that's another lawsuit in and of itself, potentially. So
Right.
I think that's why they're working with investors, trying to get that done so they can avoid that potential lawsuit. But
I believe that would be yet another class action lawsuit, right? It would be consumers against them. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So basically, they are working with investors to help them avoid another lawsuit because they're already in the midst of one lawsuit for shady shit. And, because then once you get that, then the government starts stepping in and getting involved in the games industry because that worked so well the first time or in the past. So I think it's a good call trying to do that just to kind of protect trying to protect the customers that they have. Because you've got, the repercussions of one outweigh the repercussions of the other, but they're both huge consequences.
I see where you're coming from. I slightly disagree, just because I understand, and this is weird because I'm always in the camp of the consumer, but at the end of the day, I understand how the consumer can feel because they're getting ripped off, and they absolutely are because they paid for something that they are no longer getting. However, at the end of the day, the people who want that game, they want it because they want to see the end of Clementine's story. And that's a character that they have grown to love and grown attached to, and I get that. But Clementine, at the end of the day, is a fictional character, and people with real lives and real bills and real families and real livelihoods that they need to take care of are being affected by this, and I believe that they need to be priority first. So if they are going to get money from investors, I think it needs to go towards giving all the people who work towards giving you the games that the consumers love so much their rightful severance and healthcare to a certain extent.
And I do agree with you in that point of, they're both really big things. And yeah, they are fictional characters. Personally, if it were up to me, I would rather give 300 people their severance and everything like that rather than give 3 or 6,000 people, $30 a piece saying, hey, sorry, it sucks. You've got, the minimum goodwill of saying, we'll give you a refund, but just so you know, we can't finish this because we're going to give a fuck about the people we let down versus, we got to protect the consumer and get all this done because Lord knows what will happen if we don't. And you worked with us for years, fuck you.
Yeah. I mean, if they are able to get the money from investors to do both, then great. But I don't know if they can even do that. But I don't know. What do you think, BJ? This whole thing sucks, doesn't it?
Yeah, the whole thing sucks. I mean, it's a really big mess. But an even bigger question for me is kind of looking in the future just from what this whole mess is going to do, if anything, in terms of changing the culture of the industry on the inside, as well as the more superficial, how is the story of Telltale's actual success and the innovation that they had in the games industry, how is that going to inspire or lead to other similar kind of choose your own adventure games, and how that legacy is going to continue. And that's kind of what I've really been mulling over, because we all know there's a crap storm coming for Telltale, and from the sounds of it, it's going to be mismanaged just the way it was mismanaged before, when the company had money. So I have no doubts about, things probably getting worse for everyone involved in the whole Telltale thing. But in a way, I'm also interested to see people, all these different companies like HBO. It's already proven HBO, Netflix, DC, Marvel, all these entities are starving for video game content that isn't run of the mill. They were willing to invest in a company, and just like you were saying earlier, Netflix wants to get a Stranger Things project out there, and since they can't get it with Telltale now, they're going to look elsewhere. It will be interesting to see how companies like this, whether this deters them, whether this deters them and they go, oh my God, we didn't know we were giving money to people that were, messing around with their employees like this, and that this is a regular thing in many, not all, in many companies or something, or whether they're going to be like, you know what, we're only going to, change the way we deal with these companies first, but we're still going to keep looking. And, on top of that, just saying storytelling, I think all three of us will agree. These Telltale games, the stories that were in these games were fantastic. You know what I mean? I mean, even the mediocre ones were probably enjoyable enough to go through at least once, just to see what happened, or just to see, because you're interested in the characters, and the way they developed the characters was, in a way that's different from many of the video games that are out there. Mm-hmm. And it just showed that as a community, as a gamer community, we are starving for really, really well developed stories where you can pay writers good money to give us a product that isn't completely revolving around this.
Yeah.
You know, your reaction time. You can actually throw a really good, meaty story in there with multiple endings and it be, you know,
It's
worth
more
its
focused
weight.
around problem solving as opposed to Twitch
Right.
reactions.
Yeah, it doesn't necessarily have to be a 200-hour investment.
Yeah.
You know, it can be a few hours and be mind blowing and be something that, you know, if they write in the correct way with multiple endings, you'll replay over and over again just to see what else can happen.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm very curious to see because I've got a, you know, just like you said earlier, Esteban, the co founders left, but they left and they went and started other indie companies to do similar things just on another level. Because I mean, I haven't played Watch yet. Isn't it like free now or something like that? But I've heard good things about it. You know,
in terms of adventure games, like recently, I know about them leaving and making that game specifically because Firewatch is arguably my favorite out of all these type of games.
Mhm.
Like your Gone Homes and your Everyone's Gone to the Rapture and those type of games. Firewatch is my favorite. I still think about that game to this day and how that story was told.
Mhm.
It's fantastic. So
I think
go ahead.
that this is definitely going to shake a lot of things up. Like
it needs to.
it, I
I
think
don't
it
know
is.
if it will. It definitely needs to.
I think it will because of how big of a shitstorm this has caused, how big of a stink there is right now. You're going to have, especially depending on the results of the lawsuit, because if it turns out that Telltale has to pay so many millions of dollars to their former employees because of what had happened, you're going to get people, you know, not just from other, I'm going to call it mid indie companies, things like your Way Forwards and your Donuts, places like that. You're going to have those companies saying, okay, we're going to double down on this. We're going to make sure we're going to take care of our employees. Everything's going to go well. And especially with the news stories going open about the working conditions that they were going through, you're going to see people double down on, okay, we don't crunch. We're going to provide you with good benefits, everything else like that. We're going to take care of you.
Yeah.
I'm not certain I agree with that. One thing I've noticed about industries in general is that if it'll fly and they can make money, they're going to do it, regardless of what's happened in the past. And which is kind of, and Esteban kind of mentioned this before, which is kind of the reason why so many different industries or so many different workers that don't have unions push for unions so badly because they will, companies, it doesn't matter how many times a company goes under, has bad press or whatever, companies will just do more to kind of pat their employees on the back to the point where they're satisfied enough to continue that toxic culture.
Yeah.
You know? And until there's real pain in the entire industry where, you know, a lot of the people get together and find a way to get enough power over over developers and studios to work with a union, then more than likely the crunch will remain and companies will just look for other ways to just, you know, like I said, pat their employees on the back so that they don't get angry.
Yeah.
What will change, though, is how venture capitalists decide to invest in video game companies. That will be instant because more than likely, they'll be less likely to give high dollar values to companies because they'll just say, look at this and be like, this is even higher of a risk. And then look at how poorly everything else is being managed in this situation, which will put even more burden on the idea makers in the video game industry to get bigger because it's not going to stop them from, being an indie company and doing Kickstarters and stuff, but it will stop them from take that next step before they go public or something to that, to that effect. So
yeah, I
that's
think
nice.
I'm not going to say that there will not be any type of crunch or anything like that, but what this kind of puts me to mind of, and what you said is kind of the same thing with whole Kickstarter and everything, was the whole Mighty Number Nine debacle that was going on. I feel like Mighty Number Nine and the whole thing that happened with that, especially with what was it, Red Dawn, that they also tried to get kickstarted.
Red
The
something.
it was going to be the spiritual
Ash.
successor to. I'm sorry.
Red Ash.
Red Ash. There you go. Yeah, Red Ash. I feel like with that whole debacle, now people are a lot more concerned about kickstarting a game since that has happened. And I feel like what you were saying, BJ, is pretty much the same thing. With Kickstarter, the backers are basically those type of venture capitalists. And
Our Citizen, that's an even bigger prime example. One of the biggest examples of, am I going to get my return? And people looking at and dumping all this money into it and being, what the, how long is it going to take you? And the whole toxic culture at that company, and how it still persists. And yet they're still getting money. They're still pushing forward, somehow.
Yeah. And I feel like Telltale will stand as an example of something. Yeah. No matter what, even if it's something about the culture of the game industry, whether it's the formation of unions, whether it is just venture capitalists being a bit more wary about what will happen, regardless, Telltale is going to be an example of a failure of some sort. But they were also a success.
That I think is the thing to kind of hit on all the things you were saying, which was several. Telltale's legacy is going to be how they revived the adventure genre and they revolutionized it and they got it going again. And it's also going to be about how badly they fell at the end. I don't think that you're going to be able to talk about Telltale without this being part of it, without these layoffs and how badly that they treated their employees and how poorly it was managed. It's going to be in the conversation along with they also revolutionized the adventure genre. And that's unfortunate. Yep. But
such an important
done what they've done then.
Innovation. Innovation is so important.
It is. Going back to what you were saying before, BJ, about how is this going to affect these types of games going forward and people want to invest in it. I think the genre will actually be, I don't know if it's going to be as popular as it was, but I think it's going to be just fine because there have been people.
Well, I don't see it as, I don't necessarily even see it as damaging the genre because, I mean, to your point, you even said, what was it, Firewatch, Gone Home,
Life is Strange is probably
Life is Strange. Those games are doing really well, and they're getting sequels now, and they're, I think they're doing well, right? They are doing well, right?
I mean, Firewatch is not getting a sequel because that story is done, but that company is making their next game. They did make their next game. I think Tacoma was their next game.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I think the genre is I don't want to say booming, but it definitely is.
It's fine. It's not in any bad shape. And I don't think it's going to.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't think it's going to be in bad shape just because Telltale did this happened with Telltale. No. I still think some investor capitalists and venture capital investors, I should say, will still see the value in these types of games because there's other people doing it successfully. I do think some will be a little hesitant because there isn't a big example of how this could not work. But I don't think it's going to be too bad because there are examples of how this does work. Not that all adventure games or games of these types are funded by venture capital, but that doesn't really matter because the point is, though, is that they can see, oh, this is a way that this could work.
Mm-hmm. Because the way I see it is kind of in my mind, you always have the people, you always have people that have money that are willing to give to an idea or whatever. And most of the time, those groups specialize in certain industries or, certain types of tech or whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, you get those groups where they're like, oh, we want to expand and we want to get into this new industry and we want to try this out as well. I see it more as affecting those groups where they're like, oh, we've never invested in video games before, but we want to invest in them. But, oh, we just heard this big, nasty story about Telltale and da-da-da-da. They're going to be hesitant because of, all the hoopla surrounding Telltale. I see it affecting those kinds of groups more so than, like you were saying, groups that are like, oh, we've already invested in, the company.
So the new investors,
Firewatch. We know who to invest with. Don't worry, we're good. Don't worry about it. We'll still give y'all some.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair. I think
that's just what I think. That's an assumption. Again, these are all assumptions.
I think that's a fair assumption. I think maybe you'll probably be right. I also wonder if maybe some of them, maybe these are people who are not good at investing money. I don't know. But maybe there's some people who will do it regardless because they still see the video game industry and how they can make, like, I don't know, the biggest selling, product in the history of entertainment. Like Grand Theft Auto.
Way to go, Rockstar. I can get that out of
somewhere.
We love you guys.
Yeah. It might be happening again really soon with Red Dead Redemption 2 coming out. Who knows?
Oh, Lord have mercy, yes.
If it's not going to top GTA 5, it could be really close. So
it definitely has a shot, I'll say that much.
Really close to 500 million in 1 hour or 1 day or whatever it was is still nothing to laugh at.
Show it.
But the other effects of this is going to be, I hope this brings more conversation about unions. I know there's a part of this country that sees unions as a bad thing because of the fees and how some of them are managed, and like there's like the
corruption,
there's like the corrupt music union like in the South, which is just basically the mafia. That's screwed up. Okay, we're not talking about that. We're talking about a proper union. That actually does what it's supposed to do.
Yep.
I'm for that. I think it's well overdue because of the way that this keeps happening. Because I do believe you're right, BJ. If no one tells these companies not to do this, they will do that. That's typically why all these laws to protect workers exist. It's because if you don't tell somebody in business not to do this, they will just do it because they tend to think about their bottom line and their wallet over people, and that's unfortunate. That makes me think, what the hell are we teaching people in business class? But
yeah,
I think it will impact that. If anything, this will just keep up the conversation, and companies may still try to get away with it, but it's really, I feel like because of the internet and because video gamers in general tend to be very up to date and informed about the product that they play, that they use, that it's hard to get things by them. Even if they can't necessarily do something about it. What I mean is it's very hard for somebody to do something really shitty in the video game industry and then not get spread like wildfire, either on Reddit or on Reset Era. It doesn't matter. You try to sneak in some on this DLC onto a game, people are going to find that shit. They're going to data mine that stuff. There's people who look for this stuff because they know that the video game industry cannot be trusted because there's not enough regulations on it, because nobody pays attention to us because we're a new industry and nobody knows what they're doing yet, and people usually at the top like to take advantage of that. But this is why we have essentially our own policing force, making sure that if you do something like this, you get put on blast. And it's really hard to get away with stealing something in the sun as opposed to in the darkness.
Yes.
So if this doesn't make immediate change, it's going to infer change in the future. I
sure hope so.
So I think we're going to have to take another break. And when we come back, we'll talk about a little bit about the legacy of Telltale, so that we don't end things on such a dour note, because I know this episode's been really sucky because this has been such a bad situation. But we want to give a little respect to Telltale and the things that they did do for the video game industry. So we'll be right back, everyone. Do not go anywhere. Welcome back, everyone, to the Shaded Pixels podcast. We are still talking about Telltale Games, its shutdown, and how depressing it all is. But we want to end on a high note because Telltale Games made a lot of impressive games. They did so much for the adventure genre. So let's give them a proper send off. Shawn,
peace, bitches. Oh, sorry.
Oh, or BJ, you go. Screw it. I don't.
Yeah.
No,
I'll put it this. I'll put it this way. I was one of those people that really loved the concept. I've always enjoyed, like choose your own adventure style games and everything. So um I didn't really jump for joy at the chance to play Walking Dead. I didn't get that affinity for Clementine and that storyline. I mean, I kind of liked Lee a bit,
Mm-hmm.
but because I didn't play through it before everyone else did, and hearing the ending, before I got to the ending, kind of spoiled it for me.
Yeah.
So, it was kind of one of those deals for me. I kind of saw value in it in the way that they handled the Game of Thrones game, because it focused their storyline on one of the lesser known houses in the Game of Thrones. Uh, uh, what's the word I'm looking for? Realm or pantheon, or you know what I mean? Yeah, yeah, yeah. It was. I loved that it still related to the story as it was unfolding on HBO. So it was relatable. It wasn't so far distant that it was some house that was on, the other side of the wall, and you're just like, well, where are all the characters I know? It was, you could actually trace it to specific points in that were happening in the show, or even in the book for that matter.
Yeah.
So I loved how that there was a power in their framework and how they would write their stories and how they could use it to relate to something that's evolving as it was, as they were doing the games.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I kind of was excited about things like the Stranger Things, title, and them licensing other things such as Marvel and DC, and their possibilities that they could do that may have tie-ins to existing movies or TV shows that would be more interesting, that maybe possibly they weren't going to be able to pull off in a live action kind of way without spending uber amounts of money. Whereas, in a video game, they could rip it off in a good clip and yet still have a meaty story that wasn't so hung up on the action, but could dig real, and that could really dig into characters and character interaction. I mean, imagine if they had done something like with Marvel doing like X-Men and being able to, and actually being able to do something maybe even at the X-Men mansion. And because I could see value in them doing something with with completely new young characters in the X-Men mansion, that have occasional interaction with people or superheroes that we know, and it still be a hit, not necessarily a hit, but still be gripping, still be interesting, but still be something I'd want to play.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where I saw the value in Telltale and the way they approached all the licenses. Even though I haven't played the Batman, I've heard about the direction that they were taking it, and it seemed very appealing, as if it was an actual book, or could have been a book that they just wrote multiple endings to. So I'm a part of me is going to miss that, because even with other companies doing narrative style games and in that fashion, there aren't any that I know of that do it with licenses in the way that Telltale basically was notorious for.
Yeah.
Yeah. My mind keeps on going back to the heyday of Telltale, and this is like right after The Walking Dead came out, after season 1 had ended. They announced season 2. Wolf Among Us was still coming out. That was garnering a lot of praise. One of my favorite video game trailers of all time is the Tales from the Borderlands trailer. Because at that point, they had leaked that they were going to do a Game of Thrones, and they were going to announce it at the Game Awards. So we all knew, okay, that was coming. That game was coming. And then I just remember watching, and I was like, okay, Telltale Games is going to be a Game of Thrones game. What's this? And then
That's true.
because I went back to watch it last week, and I was like, you know, that's still one of my favorite announcement trailers because it caught me so much by surprise. And when that game got announced, and when Game of Thrones got announced, you had articles upon articles of people saying, "Yes, this is great. Here's my top 5 franchises I want Telltale to take care of. I want to see all of this get done." And then you saw people kind of get worried for Telltale about, this is a lot of franchises they're taking on. We're kind of worried about that. And, it kind of tapered off. But when you have that type of discussion, when you have people saying, you know what, I want to see this style applied to this franchise. If you had told me 5 years ago, or when that was going through, oh, by the way, they're going to make a Batman game, and they're going to make a Marvel game, and there's going to be a Minecraft story mode that they're going to take care of, I would have said you're crazy. I would have said, get out, you have lost your mind. But now I look at them like, they have left such a large catalog and a large library of games that I can think of only one franchise that's kind of surpassed that in terms of franchise quality, and that's Lego. Because you can make anything out of Lego. You got Lego everything. Yeah. But
that's true.
Another thing that you have to remember is in the future, they have kind of, brought back, they had that revival of, the choose your own adventure, the, who lives and who dies, the Clementine will remember this, little headings up there. Those things are iconic with Telltale. And you've seen that creep their way into newer games, AAA games that don't have anything like that. One of the big things was Uncharted 4. You had certain different options there in a straightforward action game where they embraced a lot more of those adventure elements, where they said you can choose some of your own path. And even with a game that released this year, Detroit Become Human, granted that's a David Cage fest, but
yeah.
You can see elements of Telltale going on from there in the whole, Connor, his influence went up 2 points and all this kind of stuff. You can see elements of Telltale structure within that game, just with shittier storytelling and a bad metaphor because David Cage can't write games.
It's funny because
hot takes.
David Cage's games are I mean, I guess they're technically adventure games too. And the first one I played was Indigo Prophecy, or Fahrenheit as it was called in the other countries. And that was back in like 2004, and that was actually around the same time that Telltale was founded.
But that one had Simon.
Yeah, that's the thing. I was going to say, but the way they did it was different. It was just Simon says. But okay, Telltale was a company that their games never really pulled me in because it was something that I was not used to. When I was a kid, I was poor, and as a result, I did not have a computer. And as a result, I did not play any adventure games because they didn't get ported to consoles. There was no Grim Fandango on PS1 or anything like that. So this idea of adventure games is something that I had heard about, but I wasn't really familiar with myself at the time. And then Steam came along, and I finally got a computer that could actually run games. And once I figured out how to actually do that, because it was still kind of foreign to me, I specifically remember buying Half-Life 2, and then I put the disc in, and it told me to install Steam, and I went, why isn't it playing the game?
Game and tray, we're no game.
But a little bit after that, I got a copy of Sam & Max. And not Hit the Road, not the old one, but the one the Telltale game it had. And to this day, I think that's the only Telltale game that I've finished a season of. It's hilarious. The original Sam & Max is really good. A lot of people kind of know that, but it was before they got really big with The Walking Dead. So Telltale had their shit together before a lot of people realized. And while I would dabble with their games later on, I dabbled with the first season of Walking Dead, and I enjoyed it, but not enough to really continue going. And Wolf Among Us, same thing. Tales from the Borderlands, same thing. Game of Thrones I actually never tried at all because it was so tied to the HBO show, and I haven't seen almost any of that. So I'm like, I'm not going to know any of this, so I didn't even bother trying.
Yeah, that is kind of I guess you could say a con of that. I could see that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. If you don't know anything about it, then you're kind of screwed.
Lost.
Whereas with The Walking Dead, it's okay because they decided to do their own thing. But I still always thought that it was cool for what they're doing, and then it's not like that style of game didn't end up grabbing me because we were talking about before, I love Firewatch, and I've played Gone Home and all these other adventure style games that I feel got a lot more attention just because of games like Telltale going to the mainstream with The Walking Dead. And honestly, also on a professional note, back when I was running Gaming Precision and we started contacting companies about trying to get them to work with us, the very first company that worked with us was Telltale. So that was very cool.
We're very eager. That's for certain. They had no choice.
Yeah. A company like us, and like, all right, well, we'll work with you guys. I'm like, all right.
Oh, yeah, we'll give you a code. We'll give you 10 codes. Here you go.
Yeah. So that was cool. So I always remember them for that too, just because they're literally one of my first contacts with the industry.
Yep.
So yeah, I Telltale did something for the industry that I think is impactful, especially on the indie side. I think it was like the second wave, sort of speak, of the indie kind of craze that they helped pioneer. Even though they ended up not being indie themselves, I don't think having almost 300 employees kind of, counts as being indie anymore. But when they started, they weren't that size, and I think they also kind of kicked off the second wave of the indie movement after like the first wave with Xbox Live in the previous generation, and then going into 2012, I want to say, with The Walking Dead Season 1. And that kind of kicked off the second wave of, instead of like the puzzle platformers, you got all these adventure games now.
Yep.
And and now all those like you were saying, Shawn, all those gameplay style things are now leaking into other games, like Uncharted 4 and Witcher 3 and insert your game here.
Yeah.
So I think that's going to wrap it up for us. Before we go, though, we do our own things as well as this podcast. So let's give us some time to kind of pitch what we kind of do and just kind of let you know. BJ, how about you go first?
I am in the never-ending circle of attempting to stream again. I know I say it every week and it doesn't come to fruition, but it's the fall now. Things are starting to slow down for me, I hope. So I'm hoping I'll be able to get back into streaming so that at the very least I can get some MechWarrior Online and some NBA 2K and probably Battlefield 5, because those are like my meat and potato grind games that I typically stream anyways. So I'm hoping I'll be able to get that going Wednesdays, 10 p.m. Eastern time again, and we'll see how that goes. And I'm basically the same on every network there is known to man. Bunneth 3000, Bunneh 3000, Mixer, Twitch, YouTube, Facebook, not Instagram because I don't do Instagram. I'm too old for that. You
No,
know,
you're not.
just everywhere there is just about that's where I'm is. Just
My
look for it.
mother's on Instagram. You're not too old for Instagram.
I feel like it. Jeez. Kids make you feel really old, and I've got 5 of them. So yeah.
Just post pictures of your pets. You'll be fine.
Oh yeah.
What about you, Sean? What you got going on, man?
All right. So I have broken officially my non-video posting streak of about 6 or 7 months. So I'm certainly
Beautiful.
happy about that.
That's awesome. Congrats.
So I am getting back into the swing of things. Got a lot of stuff going on.
Hercules,
Yeah.
Hercules.
Yeah. I've got a basically review, my thoughts on Spider-Man. That's up.
I saw that. It's good. Go check it out.
Yeah. Starting sometime this week. I don't know what day or what time. I think it's going to be Thursday. And then starting every Thursday going through, I'm going to start copying Esteban. Starting my own playthrough of Murdered Soul Suspect, trying to get everybody into the spooky spirits. So, literally. And
You're dead in that game.
And I've also got a couple of other videos going through. Got a bit more PUBG coming up, as well as a few more videos with the newer games coming out. So you can always check that out on my channel, youtube.com/ShawnStudios. You can always follow me on Twitter. That's at Little Big Ham. You can find me on Facebook. That's also Jonathan Studios. And you can always follow me there for all my updates and everything that's going on. So hit me up. Talk to me. Talk shit about me. I don't care. As long as you're talking to me, that's fine. So
your poop is irregular.
Nice.
Esteban, take over.
Good try.
What you got?
Good try.
Okay, let's see. Content for me is a little sporadic, just because I'm trying to figure out stuff that will get more viewers / readers / just people interacting in general. Currently, I still have my Alice Madness Returns playthrough going up on my channel. It's going up actually more frequently just because I had just happened to have the videos up, like done and edited and everything. So there was an episode on Monday. There's another episode going up tomorrow. We're almost done with that game, so please check it out. I know it's not like the most popular game and everything, but that game is freaking weird, and people need to pay more attention to it. That's why I play it. I still have the Sonic Adventure playthrough going through as well. That one, actually, I will just straight up tell you, is done. And so the finale is going to be coming up. So check that out. Episode starting the Cat campaign went up today. Excuse me. Big the Cat! And the episode finishing Big the Cat's campaign, because his campaign is the smallest in that game, goes up on Thursday, I believe.
Thank Christ. Sorry.
Look, I said in the video, I'll say it here again. Big the Cat is not good, but he's inoffensive. It's over so quickly that it's like, who cares? That's my thought.
It's positive.
Replacing those playthroughs once they're done, I'm going to be playing some new games to hopefully get more people interested, so look out for that. Streaming, nothing's happening with that right now as I'm trying to figure out the video stuff. Writing, I put up my impressions on the Soul Calibur 6 beta that happened this past weekend. Go check that out at heycolorwin.wordpress.com. By the way, the YouTube channel is youtube.com/colorwin. And I finished Okami recently. Thank freaking Christ. I swear to God, that game is actually Okami 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 all in one. So I'm gonna probably write a review about it because somehow I played 5 games in one. But other than that, just check me out on social media at Hey Colorwin on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, Tumblr, Pinterest, Google Plus, LinkedIn. I'm sure somehow MySpace is in there. I don't know.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think that's everything we got going through the pipe right now.
All right. And ladies and gentlemen, I think I can speak for Esteban, MBJ, and myself here. We at the Shaded Pixels podcast are always improving, always looking for new ways to reach more beautiful people out there. So I know I personally myself, I love constructive criticism, and I want to find ways to improve. BJ's already perfect
BJ
the way
praise.
he is. So he doesn't
Thank you. Perfect. Don't come at me with no nonsense. If it's not positivity, I don't want to hear it.
Send BJ nothing but praise. Send Shawn nothing but constructive criticism. And
send all of your negative
nothing
feedback to
but
Shawn Richards
game codes.
shadedpixels.com. Don't send anything there. There is nothing there.
Yeah. It's under construction. It's fine.
Yeah. And, so check out our channels. Check out our stuff. Tell us what we can do to deliver you amazing people more amazing content. And that includes the channel here. You got your audio podcast going up at podcast.com on Wednesday nights. You got your video portion going up on YouTube at Thursdays, 10 a.m. Eastern, 7 o'clock Pacific. And then you, of course, got us on Twitch, where you'll catch us live and proud at Tuesdays, 10 o'clock Eastern, 7 o'clock Pacific, in the evening and at the night.
We're flaming proud. We're here. We're queer. Yes. We don't want any more bears.
Bears are good. Oh, yeah. YouTube. Twitter. At Shaded Pixels. You'll find all the stuff on either side of me.
Yeah. It's not both, but it's there. You can see it. One of those thumbs was correct.
One side is logo, the other side is all the information. And it'll also be at the ending of this video where you'll find all of our great content. Bam.
Yeah.
You know what I've been doing recently to make me laugh? I've been singing Simple and Clean, the Kingdom Hearts song, in the voice of Goofy.
We love you, Esteban.
Oh, me, whatever lies beyond this morning, leave me a little later on. Regardless of warning, the future doesn't scare me at all. Nothing's like before.
That's pretty good. That's pretty good.
Look, it was a depressing episode. I had to do something. There you go, ladies and gentlemen. That's a good way to finish this one.
Say word.
Goodbye. Peace and love, gamers and players. The Shaded Pixels podcast out.